When we talk about success, the conversation usually shifts to the usual metrics: grades, promotions, awards, titles. From the time we're children, we're asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" As if life is a ladder, and the goal is to reach the top as quickly as possible. But the real question isn't what we want to be. It's why we want to be it. Because chasing a title without understanding our purpose leaves us empty at the top. Most people think success means being the best, the smartest in the room, the fastest on the field, the highest paid in the office. But those are outcomes. They're results. They're byproducts of something deeper, something more powerful. The people we admire most didn't get where they are because they were trying to be better than everyone else. They got there because they were trying to be better than who they were yesterday. This difference matters. When we chase being the best, we start comparing. We measure our worth against others. And when someone else gets ahead, we feel behind. That mindset creates fear, pressure, and anxiety. It teaches us to avoid mistakes because failure means we've fallen off the path to the best. It makes us play small, not bold. But when we chase becoming better, we start growing. We stop comparing and we start learning. A growth mindset doesn't fear mistakes. It studies them. It treats every challenge as a chance to stretch, not shrink. And that's when something beautiful happens. We become more resilient, more adaptable, and more fulfilled. People with a growth mindset don't wake up asking, "How do I win today?" Ask, "How do I grow today?" How do I grow today? That one-word shift changes how we see effort, feedback, and even failure. Growth becomes the goal, not perfection. And when growth is the goal, success stops being a destination. It becomes a process. The most innovative leaders, the strongest athletes, the most creative artists, all share this trait. Not that they were always the best, but that they kept getting better. Day after day, setback after setback. They didn't let failure define them. They let it refine them. They had the humility to admit they didn't know it all, and the courage to keep showing up anyway. We've been conditioned to believe that success is about titles, trophies, and talent. But real success, deep, fulfilling, sustainable success, is about progress. It's about potential. It's about playing the long game. And that begins when we stop asking, "Am I the best?" and start asking, "Am I getting better?" Because the real measure of success isn't where you stand today. It's the direction you're heading. And the most powerful force that determines that direction isn't your resume, your IQ, or your background. It's your mindset. There's a moment in every person's life when they stop raising their hand. Not because they don't know the answer, but because they're afraid of being wrong. That moment, subtle, almost invisible, is often when the fixed mindset starts to take hold. It convinces us that it's safer to stay silent than to risk looking foolish. And over time, that fear becomes the lens through which we see the world. A fixed mindset tells us that our abilities are set in stone. You're either smart or you're not. You're talented or you're not. And the moment you fail, that illusion cracks. So instead of leaning into challenges, people start avoiding them. Not because they lack ambition, but because failure feels like a verdict, not a lesson. If success proves your worth, then failure must expose your lack of it. This mindset whispers that mistakes are shameful. That effort is a sign you're not naturally gifted. That asking for help means you're weak. So we build walls around ourselves. We avoid risk. We stay where we feel competent. And in doing so, we shrink our world. We trade growth for comfort and potential for predictability. But here's the irony. The more we fear failure, the more power it holds. We start making decisions based on what we want to avoid, not what we want to become. That's how the fixed mindset traps us, not with chains, but with self-doubt. It tells us we're not ready, not good enough, not cut out for it. And eventually, we believe it. You see it in classrooms, in boardrooms, and creative work. Talented people hiding behind the mask of competence, terrified of being exposed. They'd rather stay in the zone of what they already know than risk entering a space where they might stumble. Because somewhere along the line, they were taught that stumbling makes them unworthy. It's not just about fear of failure. It's fear of judgment. Fear that failure will confirm our worst insecurities. That others will finally see that we're not as capable as they thought. So we don't take the leap. We don't raise our hand. We don't try that thing we've been dreaming of, just in case we're not good at it. And this isn't limited to individuals. Organizations do it too. Teams stop innovating when failure is punished instead of studied. Cultures become risk-averse when perfection is rewarded and vulnerability is avoided. People stop growing when mistakes are met with blame instead of curiosity. The fixed mindset doesn't just limit what we do, it limits who we become. It draws a box around our identity and tells us not to step outside. It keeps us stuck, not because we lack ability, but because we're afraid to test it. We've been taught to see failure as the opposite of success. As something to avoid, something to fear, something that tells the world we're not good enough. But what if that idea is wrong? What if failure isn't the end, but information? What if it's not a verdict, but a signal? Failure stings. It bruises the ego, challenges our identity, and threatens our sense of progress. But at its core, failure is a mirror. It reflects what didn't work, not who we are. And yet, most people internalize failure. They don't just fail at something. They start to believe they are failures. That mindset shuts the door on learning before it even begins. Every time we fail, we receive data about the process, about the approach, about our habits, assumptions, and timing. That data is rich. It's honest, unfiltered, and specific. It tells us exactly where we are, not where we wish we were. But only if we're willing to look at it without ego. Think about how kids learn to walk. They fall. A lot. But no one says, well, walking just isn't for them. We cheer them on because we know failure is part of learning. Somewhere along the way, though, we lose that grace. We start seeing falling down as a sign to stop, instead of a reason to get better at balancing. The people who grow the most aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who mine it. They treat it like feedback. They ask better questions. What did I miss? What could I change? What does this teach me? They understand that failure doesn't define the outcome. How we respond to it does. In sports, in science, in startups, failure isn't just common, it's necessary. The first version rarely works. The second might not either. But each attempt sharpens the edge. Each misstep is a lesson in disguise. In high-performance cultures, failure is expected, talked about, and used as fuel. When failure is hidden or punished, people hide and shrink. They protect their pride instead of testing their limits. But when failure is seen as feedback, something shifts. Risk becomes part of the process. Creativity gets permission to breathe. People start to innovate, not just improve. We don't get to choose whether we fail. We only get to choose how we interpret it. And when we shift that interpretation from final to formative, we free ourselves to try again. This time smarter, stronger, and more aware. There's a quiet confidence that comes from curiosity, a willingness to say, I don't know, but I want to find out. That mindset stands in stark contrast to the need to always be right. And yet in many environments, certainty is praised, while curiosity is overlooked. We reward the quick answer, not the thoughtful question. Certainty can feel powerful. It gives us control. It makes us appear competent. But when we cling too tightly to what we know, we stop exploring what we don't. That's the danger. Certainty creates a ceiling. Curiosity breaks it. Because while certainty seeks to protect what is, curiosity opens the door to what could be. People with a growth mindset understand that curiosity is the beginning of progress. It's what drives them to ask better questions, challenge assumptions, and look deeper. They aren't threatened by not knowing. They're energized by the chance to learn. That mindset doesn't just lead to new knowledge. It leads to new capabilities. Curiosity invites discovery. Das Discovery. It pushes us to explore new tools, new strategies, new perspectives. It forces us to listen more than we speak. It replaces judgment with empathy and swaps ego for openness. It doesn't demand that we be the smartest. It encourages us to be the most engaged. In contrast, certainty builds walls. It creates blind spots. It tells us there's one right way, one right answer, and anything else is a threat. That rigidity kills innovation. It discourages experimentation. It punishes deviation. And over time, it leads to stagnation, personally and collectively. You can see this play out in teams and organizations. Leaders who reward curiosity build cultures of growth. People speak up. Ideas flow. Questions are welcomed. But leaders obsessed with always being right create fear. People stay silent. Creativity shuts down. The room might be full of talent, but it's empty of trust. Curiosity also builds resilience. When something doesn't work, curious minds don't see it as failure. They see it as a puzzle. They lean in, not out. They ask, why did this happen? Or what could we try next? That kind of thinking doesn't just solve problems. It prevents new ones. In a world that's changing faster than ever, the most valuable mindset isn't the one that claims to have all the answers. It's the one that never stops. That's the one that never stops asking better questions. We love the myth of the genius. The prodigy who was born gifted. The overnight success who just had it. It's a comforting story because it explains success in a way that makes it feel out of reach for most. But when we look closer, we see something different. We see hours of practice, sleepless nights, quiet sacrifices, and relentless effort. Talent may open the door, but it's grit that walks through it. Effort is often underestimated because it doesn't shine. It's not flashy. It's rarely praised on social media or mentioned in highlight reels. But it's the invisible engine behind every real achievement. The ones who keep showing up, especially when it's hard, those are the ones who go the distance. Not because they're the smartest, but because they refuse to quit. We tend to label people as naturally gifted when we see them succeed, forgetting how much time we didn't see. The extra reps after practice, the failures behind closed doors, the long periods where progress was invisible. Talent might give someone a head start, but it's effort that determines who finishes the race. A growth mindset recognizes that ability is only the starting point. What matters more is what we do with that ability. Do we develop it? Stretch it? Push past the point of comfort? People with grit aren't afraid of the grind. In fact, they lean into it. Because they know that real mastery isn't found in easy wins. It's forged in persistence. Grit means you're willing to fail in public, to be embarrassed, to be underestimated, and to keep going anyway. It's the discipline to stay focused when distractions are easier. It's the humility to start over, and the courage to try again without a guarantee of success. That kind of effort compounds over time in a way talent alone never can. In the workplace, on the field, in classrooms, effort builds character. It creates people who can be counted on, who don't just rely on natural ability, but invest in themselves daily. And those people often end up leading, not because they aim to impress, but because they committed to grow. There's a kind of quiet power in showing up consistently, especially when no one is watching. When we value effort over talent, we begin to see potential everywhere. We stop writing people off. We stop labeling ourselves. And we start creating environments where growth is expected, not just performance. The truth is, grit creates more opportunities than genius ever will. Because talent without effort is wasted. But effort without talent still moves forward. Sometimes the best way to understand the power of a growth mindset is not through theory, but through real stories. Stories of people who weren't handed success, who didn't start with all the answers, but who chose to grow through what they didn't know. These aren't stories about superheroes. They're about people who made a decision to evolve rather than escape. Take the young woman who failed her university entrance exam twice. Everyone around her said maybe she wasn't cut out for academics. She believed that for a while, but instead of accepting it as a final verdict, she reframed it as a challenge. She changed how she studied, sought help, asked questions without shame, and learned how to learn. The third time, she passed, and years later she became a teacher, helping others through the very struggle that nearly broke her. Or the entrepreneur who launched a product that completely flopped. He'd spent years building it. When it failed, he could have quit. Many told him to. But instead of walking away, he got curious. He listened harder. He studied what went wrong. He rebuilt the product not around what he thought people needed, but around what they actually told him, that second version. It changed his entire career. Not because he got smarter, but because he stayed open. There's the athlete who was always the smallest on the team, always overlooked. He didn't have the speed or the strength others had naturally. But he had discipline. He trained harder. He asked coaches to be brutally honest. He watched film when others relaxed. By the time others plateaued, he was still improving. Not because he had more talent, but because he had more willingness to learn. These stories share a common thread. Not one of them started out ahead. They weren't born with more. They just chose not to settle for less. They leaned into discomfort. They embraced feedback, even when it stung. They allowed failure to teach rather than define. That's what transformation looks like. It's messy, slow, and deeply human. In each of these stories, the shift happened when the person stopped asking, "Am I good enough?" and started asking, "How can I get better?" That shift unlocks energy. It sparks momentum. And most importantly, it puts growth in our own hands, not in the hands of approval, luck, or natural ability. So, these aren't stories of perfection. They're stories of persistence, of people who weren't afraid to be beginners again, who bet on their ability to learn more than their ability to impress. That mindset doesn't guarantee easy wins, but it guarantees continuous movement forward. Transformation doesn't come from waiting for circumstances to change. It comes from choosing to grow in the middle of them. Every group of people, whether it's a team, a classroom, or a company, has a culture. And culture isn't written on a wall. It lives in what people say when no one's watching, in how decisions get made, and in what's rewarded or quietly ignored. At the center of that culture is mindset. And more often than not, the mindset of the leader becomes the mindset of the group. When leaders operate from a fixed mindset, it spreads. People stop taking risks. They play it safe. They hide their mistakes. They start to believe that only certain people are the chosen ones, and that everyone else should stay in their lane. The result is fear-based performance, people doing just enough to not mess up, instead of reaching beyond their limits. But when leaders model a growth mindset, the environment shifts. Suddenly, it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to raise your hand and say, I need help. A vulnerability becomes a strength, not a weakness. People begin to trust each other, not just with tasks, but with their learning journeys. Culture is shaped by what leaders tolerate and what they reinforce. If a leader celebrates only outcomes, then failure becomes dangerous. But if a leader celebrates effort, learning, and resilience, then people feel safe to experiment. They feel empowered to try new things, even when the path is unclear. You can see it in meetings. In one room, people hold back ideas, afraid of sounding foolish. In another, the leader asks, "Oh, what did we learn this week, even if it didn't go as planned?" That one question sends a powerful message. Growth matters more than image. And over time, that message rewires how people show up. Great leaders understand that they're not just managing performance, they're shaping belief systems, they're influencing how people see themselves and what they believe they're capable of. Every conversation, every reaction, every piece of feedback becomes a signal. And people are always listening even when nothing is said out loud. Leaders don't need to be perfect. In fact, trying to appear flawless can be damaging. What people want to see is progress. They want to know their leaders are still learning too. Because when leaders grow out loud, it gives everyone else permission to do the same. That's how culture changes. From the inside out, not from the top down. A team will never grow beyond the mindset of the person leading it. That's why the most important work a leader can do isn't just strategic, it's personal. It starts with how they think, how they respond, and how they choose to grow. There's a common misconception that a growth mindset is something you either have or you don't. As if some people were just born with a drive to improve while others weren't. But the truth is far more empowering. Growth isn't a trait. It's a choice. And more specifically, it's a choice we make again and again, every single day. You don't wake up one morning with a growth mindset and keep it forever. It's not permanent. It's something we practice. It's in the small decisions, the moments when things are hard, unclear, or frustrating. Do we lean in or back away? Do we get defensive or get curious? Get curious. That's where mindset is revealed. Some days, growth looks like confidence. Other days, it looks like vulnerability. Asking the question you're afraid to ask. Starting the project you're unsure how to finish. Admitting you were wrong. These aren't grand gestures. They're subtle shifts made over and over until they become part of who you are. It's easy to talk about growth when things are going well. The real test comes when you fall short, when the feedback stings, when progress feels invisible. In those moments, it's tempting to retreat, to protect our ego, to blame circumstances. But the people who grow the most are the ones who choose to stay open, even when it's uncomfortable. This choice happens everywhere. At work, at home, in how we respond to others, and how we speak to ourselves. Do we believe we can get better at listening, at leading, at creating? Or do we say, I'm just not good at that? The words we use matter. They reveal whether we've decided to grow or decided to stand still. Choosing growth doesn't mean forcing constant improvement. It means staying committed to learning, even when results aren't immediate. It means showing up with intention, not perfection. It means being more focused on the process than the scoreboard. That kind of mindset builds quiet strength, the kind that lasts. Over time, daily choices shape identity. The more we choose growth, the more it becomes our default. Not because we were born that way, but because we trained for it. And that training isn't reserved for a select few. It's available to anyone who's willing to step into the discomfort of becoming more. Growth isn't something we unlock once. It's something we choose, moment by moment, breath by breath, with every decision to show up a little braver, a little more honest, and a little more willing to become who we're capable of being.